What's going on YouTube? So today I finally gathered the last remaining parts for the full tune-up on my GT500. I'm going to make individual videos on each of these processes. I'm going to make a video on replacing both the 10 rib and 6 rib belt, coil packs, fuel filter, spark plugs, which that's going to be involved with the coil pack video. And I am going to be replacing transmission fluid on my car, but I already have a video of this, so we're not going to focus on that. But I am going to make a video on replacing the belts, since I haven't really found many videos on YouTube about doing this. I mean, it's a pretty simple job anyway. And fuel filter, it's a pretty easy job. I mean, all of this is easy. The spark plugs and coil packs are going to be easy, but I'm just going to make those in individual videos just for time management's sake versus doing all of this in one video. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my Shelby up into the carport, and we are going to get started on replacing the belts. So the car I'm working on is my 2012 Shelby GT500, but this whole tune-up process is going to be pretty much the same for every S197 GT500. The only difference is going to be with the belt diagram, and that's only because the 2011 and up Shelbys have electric power steering, so the pulley sizes will be different versus the prior year cars with hydraulic power steering. Other than that, the coil pack, spark plugs, the whole general process of replacing the belts is going to be the exact same for every version of the S197 GT500. So I'm going to go ahead, pop the hood, and we're going to get started with replacing the belts. So removing the belts is pretty straightforward, but we do need to remove the 4 10mm bolts that hold in these coolant reservoirs, because it's going to give us more access to both the 10 rib tensioner down here and the 6 rib tensioner, which is down here. So I'm going to go ahead and mount my phone up on a tripod and get these bolts out and show you what's next. So 10mm, we have 4 of these. With those loosened up, we can actually pull the reservoirs up and out of the way. We can go ahead and leave this one in place, but this is the main tensioner we need to work with right now, so we can pull this one out so we can have extra room to get the tensioner down there, which I will show you guys next. So this one doesn't really want to move. This is aftermarket, by the way, so if you're working on a stock coolant reservoir, you can actually leave it bolted down because it is so small in capacity. You can actually work around it. But our tensioner for the 6 rib belt is actually down here. Let me turn the flashlight on. So the flashlight is on, and it is right here underneath this auxiliary pulley right here. And I believe it is a 15, so we're going to hook a 15 wrench up to that. So we're going to get this 15 started, and I think I'm going to grab the camera and actually put it down here so you guys can get a better look at what I'm doing. So we're going to push down on that 15, and then the 6 rib belt actually just pops right off, and now it's just trying to snake it off everything, the alternator, all these other pulleys. So with this coolant reservoir pulled to the side, you can actually reach down on the crank and grab the 6 rib belt and pull it out from here. It comes out pretty easy. This is the belt itself. On my car, this one's in good shape, but since I already have a brand new one and I'm replacing the main 10 rib belt, it's best to go with new. So with that belt out of the way, we have better visibility at that 15 I was telling you guys about. So I'm gonna reach my wrench down here and get it started. I finally got it on there. You push down and you can see the tensioner move, and that releases the tension to pull the belt off. We want to get a breaker bar and a 3/8 extension to put into the tensioner to loosen up the tension to pull the belt off. My camera doesn't want to focus, but the 3/8 drive extension setup that I have is actually right there. We go. So we have that in place. I'm going to mount my phone, and I'm going to release the tension and pull the belt off the snout of the blower. So breaker bar is in place. I'm going to push it over, and that's going to release the tension of the belt. I'm going to pull the belt off the snout, pull back on the tensioner, and now we're just going to pull this belt off the AC compressor and the crank. So with the belt loosened up and out of the way, we can actually remove the tensioner so the belt can come off completely. So it is a 16 millimeter, and we are just going to use a 3/8 ratchet with a 16 millimeter socket on there, and get it started in there, break it loose, and I'm going to hook up my electric ratchet and just zip that out. So right now I have my electric ratchet hooked up to it, and now we have the tensioner and bolt removed. So now that the tensioner is removed, we can actually just go ahead and pull this belt completely out. It's fun snaking this stuff out. Okay, now that I have the belt snaked out, I'm going to show you guys the condition of this belt and why I'm replacing it. You can see it's dry rotted and it's cracking pretty bad. So if your belt's starting to look like this, or if you're having belt slip, it is time to replace the supercharger belt. So now I'm going to start the main supercharger belt in between all these coolant hoses and everything, because they're going to be a problem. So I'm going to upload the belt diagram now so you guys can see exactly how this belt routes. Okay, so as you can see, I have the belt very crudely routed right now. It's the AC compressor, and it goes over top of that pulley, then around the crank, and it squeezes in underneath this one, and then I have it shoved in between both this idler pulley and that one right there, and I have all the slack pulled up right here just to keep some tension on the AC compressor and crank. So now we're going to get the tensioner started, and then I'm going to push this slack back down, because once I start putting tension on the tensioner, I'm going to finish it off by installing it on the snout the same way when we first removed it. That's where we want our starting and finishing point to be. Okay, so once I got the tensioner, it started, but it's not tightened up. But once I was getting ready to put it in, I actually pushed down this excess slack and pulled it up around that tensioner while it was still wrapped around the crank pulley and the AC compressor down there. You can still see I have some slack right there. But now I'm going to pull most of the tension up back up here at the snout, and I'm going to go ahead and start tightening that up and torque it down, get the belt set back in place, make sure it's actually the ribs are in the grooves of the pulley, because we don't want them to jump off and shred the belt. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. Okay, tensioner is tightened down, belt is in place, and it's routed right. So now we're just going to torque this bad boy and get it started up on the snout. It's definitely tight, especially with the Metco auxiliary idler there, but I'm gonna double check everything. Okay, so pro tip, even though you just saw me apply tension to that tensioner and get this belt started, the belt was still loose and I had the belt routed correctly. Turns out I had the tensioner pointing down right. So when you reinstall this tensioner, you want it to sit like that, not exactly completely level, with that slight angle pointing down. I had mine pointing down too much, and that actually affected the tension. So now that I have the tensioner sitting upright how it's supposed to, it actually applied the right amount of tension. So as you can see, this belt is as snug as a bug in a rug. So just a heads up, that's something that, you know, I've never done this before, so now lesson learned. So just now you guys can learn from my mistakes. So if you're watching this, make sure your tensioner is in that orientation right there, and your belt will actually be tight and ready to go. And just make sure, like I said earlier, that the ribs of the belt are inside the grooves of the pulleys, because you don't want those misaligned. That will cause issues and possibly destroy the belt. So if you guys can see, it goes around this upper tensioner in the corner, down around the AC compressor, and then you have to install the tensioner with some slack pulled up to get around the tensioner pulley. So that's why the tensioner has to come off. It's just so much easier with it off to get the belt straightened back out. And then around the crank pulley, and it runs underneath this middle pulley. The water pump right there goes underneath it, then up, and it'll ride in between two idlers right there, and it'll run up to the snout. Again, this is aftermarket. This is a Metco auxiliary idler, which puts even more tension on the belt, which I highly recommend that. It's a fairly easy install. It's just 3 bolts. And then now you have the proper tension on the 10 rib belt. So now we're going to start with the 6 rib, which is going to be fun. So I'm still fighting with the 6 rib belt. It's a pain in the butt to get routed, and I finally got mine routed in place, and turns out all of that work was done in vain because the belt has to come off, and I am going to reuse my old belt, because AutoZone gave me a belt for a 2007 to 2010 Shelby GT500, which has a larger pulley for the power steering pump. The power steering pulleys are larger, so the belts are different between the differences of electric power steering and the hydraulic power steering, and you get a longer belt if you get a 2007 belt like I did. So the belt still had some tension to it, but I know as soon as I start driving the car, it's just going to fling off. So that's why I'm reusing my original belt. So I'm going to take this one back, take it off, and take it back. And I'm going to try to figure out how exactly the best way to route that 6 rib belt is, because trust me, it's aggravating. This is the right part number for the 2011 and up GT500s for the accessory belt. This is the one I'm reusing. And something else I want to show you guys that helped me was undoing this nut on this pulley right here. Helps the belt. You can kind of play with it a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and try to route this belt back into place and pay attention to how I'm routing it so I can show you guys once it's on. So the best way to get this belt started is just make a loop with your hand like this, and reach down here and start it underneath this coolant hose right here. If you can see my hand there, we're going to want to get this belt underneath that coolant hose. Let me try to get this light here, this one right here. I'm tapping it with a light. That's what we need to tuck the belt underneath. Get it tucked underneath that coolant hose, and then we can work. See how the belt's wanting to form around the crank pulley, that's what we want. So now we're going to get that belt and get it worked around the crank pulley. There we go. Like that. So now we have all this slack, it's going to get in the way, so just take your time, drink a couple beers, and just be patient. So once you play with it a little bit, you're going to tuck one end of the belt underneath that stud, and then route from the tensioner, from the crank pulley to the tensioner. You want the underside of the belt to run up from underneath that tensioner, up over the water pump, and then over this passenger side pulley. And this pulley, this belt, or route on the top, where the 2007 GT500 to 2010 pair of steering pumps would be at. So we're going to get it routed right there, and then want to finagle with it some more. Okay, so once you get this up top routed, now you're going to have this excess right here, and what the excess, where it goes, is actually around the tensioner pulley, and it's going to have some resistance. So what I'm thinking is we can pull the slack off the alternator side of the pulley, wrap it around the tensioner where it needs to be, and then once we get everything aligned exactly how we need it to, then we could hook up our 15mm wrench and apply some tension to it and get it started on the alternator. This thing is super fun. Okay, so you'll know everything is lined up perfectly when you have the belt overlapping itself. I really wish I could get this to stay like so. I'll try to get in here. See how the belt is actually overlapping each other? This phone's focus is amazing. I'm sorry. But once it overlaps like that, this slack, the overlap, will actually go over to the alternator. But I just slid something off. So honestly, you need both your hands for this, because if you try doing it one-handed like me, you're just going to knock something else off alignment. So I know I knocked something off. Yep, I knocked it off the crank pulley. So I'm going to try to get that started back up. It's getting really tight now. I have it around the alternator. That's the issue. So I'm going to take it off the alternator. Get it back around the crank pulley. Okay, so there isn't much room at all to get a breaker bar in there. I still had to use the wrench. But what I done instead, I actually got it started on the alternator. And then I had leverage to actually lean over the car and press that down and get it started on the crank pulley, because you can use your entire body weight to press down on the wrench, and then you can use your left hand to reach over there and pop that belt on. So now we need to put our little nut back on this stud, get this tightened up. Well, with the new belts installed, all you need to do is just hook up your coolant tanks, tighten them back down, and listen to your new belts and see if the squeak went away. In my case, the squeak is gone, and everything seems to be running pretty good. So, yeah, just the belts in general are a pain to replace. I figured that would be a lot easier, but it's pretty difficult actually. Anyways, that's done. I'm gonna go ahead and start editing this video and slap it together so you guys can watch it, and so you have something to follow when you replace your belts.